Yeah, we're live. Great. So, Corey, first of all, and more seriously, thank you for everything you do for our community and for taking such good care of people at the darkest times in their lives with so much love and so much compassion and so much grace. It is really appreciated. So, to all of you, thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. It's a real honor to be here. I see, of course, a lot of familiar faces in this room. There is my colleague, Councillor Willie Woo, the most popular politician in Clarington, everybody. He's true. He's already been acclaimed for his next 3 terms. So, and my other colleague is here as well, Sammy Al-Hadjeh, who is already being called the Willie Woo of Curtis. Hold on. And one of Sammy's biggest accomplishments so far is getting everybody at City Hall to pronounce his last name correctly. So there you go. And of course, I'm so glad to see so many of my friends here from Rotary, from church, from Valleys 2000, all the community causes that are really important to me. Chris asked me to speak tonight about my recent election experience. I'm not going to do that. Really, I'm going to do a couple of other things. Instead of just focusing on the local political angle, what I want to talk about tonight is public service more broadly, about what it means, to me at least, to serve other people through politics. And there are a lot of ways to do public service. Teaching is a public service, medicine is a public service, volunteering is a public service, Rotary and the tireless way that Rotarians give back to their community, that's public service. But in my life, the main way I've chosen to serve the public has been through government. And first I started out as a bureaucrat, and then I was a political staffer, and now all of a sudden I find myself as an elected official, which is really cool. And so that's the kind of public service I want to talk about tonight. And I'm going to be looking at 3 different aspects of public service with you. First, what inspires public service? Second, what's fun about public service? And third, what does public service accomplish? So let's start with the first one. What inspires people to pursue that kind of public service? Well, in my case, the answer is simple. I'm Dutch. Specifically, I'm Dutch Reformed. And there's a lot of us around here, by the way. There's a few in this room. And if you know anything about us, you'll know that we are a very hardworking, stubborn, very practical people. And my dad believed that we have a duty to use our gifts and our talents in the world to do good. And so, really simply, if you're good at something and you have the ability to do something, you should do it. And when I was a kid, I was good at 2 things. The first of those was arguing. And when I was a kid, my nickname at home was Triple L. It stood for Lloyd, the Little Lawyer. Like, bedtime was an argument. Eating my liver, my Brussels sprouts, an argument. And if PowerPoint had existed back in the 70s, I probably would have used it to help me make my argument. But here's the thing. I always argued out of principle. When I thought something was wrong, I spoke up. And as I got older, my dad and I argued all the time. Debated stuff going on in our church. We debated politics, we debated philosophy, and I learned growing up that disagreements are okay. You can love somebody a whole lot and not think the same things as them. And at the end of the day, still come out laughing on the other side. The main thing about an argument is to test ideas, check the truth, and when you're wrong, you admit it. Seems simple enough, right? But that's lacking in a lot of politics today, frankly. People aren't very civil. But I believe you can have honest disagreements among friends, and that's okay. My parents encouraged me to speak my mind, not just for myself, but for other people too. The second thing I really like to do is I like to write. Thanks, Corey, for mentioning that. As a kid, I'd check out like 10 library books every Saturday, run home, read them, spend the week writing about stuff that inspired me from them. And I really wanted to be a writer when I grew up. So I told my dad, I said, I want to be a writer. And he had written some children's books, and I thought, I'll just follow in his footsteps. And my dad said, no, that's not a career. a very practical man. You can't do writing for a living. He said, it's not a real job. So he advised me to go and teach and then write during the summer, which I did for a while. I taught at Durham Christian High here. And it wasn't really enough. One day I just decided to quit my job to be a writer. I didn't know what that meant, but I thought, I want to do that, so I'm just going to quit. That did not work out well. 6 months later, I was still doing odd jobs. I was doing landscaping in December, which is not fun. And eventually I got 2 job offers. The first was one that paid really, really well. It had a ton of security. I think it was technical writing for a software company. The second job I was offered, same time, was a 6-month speech writing job working for Mike Harris. Now, I had a problem. I was not a fan of Mike Harris. But the idea of using my own gifts and talents in this really weird, unforeseen way, like who's a speechwriter? Like, what is that? Right? Was really appealing. And I got to work for government. I got to work in the middle of public service. And I thought that was really fun too. So that sold me. Now that 6-month contract turned into a 12-year career. And eventually I found my way over to the good guys. And I started working for Dalton McGuinty. Yeah, good. All right. You're going to feel bad if you're mean to him in a second, I'll tell you. And I did that job really, really proudly. In fact, my favorite speech that I wrote for him still hangs in my office over my desk. And it's a speech about using the power of churches to help kids on the street. And it was based on 1 Corinthians 13. It was all about love. And he actually gave that speech in a church. It's one of the best things I've ever written. And here's why. Because it brought together my desire to do good for people, my passion for public service and for government, and my faith, all of which are important to me. My dad never got to see it, but I have to think he would have been proud. Now, the other major influence in my life has been, and continues to be, Dalton McGuinty. Okay. When I say that, I want you to forget the person that you think you know from TV, because in my experience, the politicians that you see on TV are not the people that they are in real life. The guy I knew, my boss, was funny, generous, he was warm, he was a great husband, he was a great father. And when I was in my 30s, I looked up to that guy as a role model of what a good guy could be like. And I remember him saying at his 50th birthday party to all of us staff members, and it was a surprise, he said, you need to do these jobs, these political jobs, to the very best of your ability because they are temporary. Everything is temporary. We are here for maybe 80, 90 years, and then we're dead for a really long time after that. Use the time you have wisely. And I thought that was great advice. He was a lot like my dad that way. And when I decided to run for Ward 2, it was kind of with those words ringing in my ears. So if I don't do a great job for you as your counselor, well, that's one more thing you can blame on Dalton McGuinty. My point here is how you start out in life really matters a lot. The people who shape us into what we will become, the people who encourage us and help us to develop our gifts, our talents, our interests, are vital to the kind of women and men that we eventually become. They inspire us. They inspire us to do and to achieve and to be more than we could ever do on our own. So I'm going to ask you tonight, who inspired you? Who were the people in your life who challenged you to be the best version of yourself? The most community-minded version of yourself. What has their influence been in your life? Think about that for a second. Did you ever thank him for it? Maybe you should. And on the other hand, the other question I want to ask you is, what are you doing to encourage a spirit of public service in the youth that you know? In your own kids and your grandkids in the community, because we need leaders, we need people who love their neighbor as they love themselves. Help to raise those good young people. Give them a good example, something to strive for. And particularly if they're young men, because this is a men's club, let them know that doing good and doing well are not mutually exclusive. That you can make a good living doing good. And that being a good man doesn't mean being a weak man. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And being good is really easy at the end of the day. If you want to be a good man, do good things. Just that simple. Which brings me to my second point. Is public service fun? Oh, heck yeah. I'll tell you a story. We toasted the king tonight, so this is a really appropriate one. So I was a political staffer, and I was at a party. The party was for Prince Charles and Camilla, who had come to Toronto. And I got invited to this thing, or maybe 500 people in the room, packed place, right? And my girlfriend was there with me, not the person I married. It's a whole other story. And all of a sudden I heard her say, "Oh yeah? Well, my boyfriend's a speechwriter." And she pulled my hand, and suddenly I'm standing in front of Prince Charles. Right? And he's holding a glass of gin in his hand, like this. And he had his index, I swear, I can remember this like it's yesterday. Index finger out like this. He's got his gin, and he's swilling it around like this, looking at me. And he says, not going to do a Prince Charles impression because I can't. He said, "So you're a speechwriter then?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Do you have any speechwriters?" And he said, "Yes, I do. I have 5. And I said, "Are any of them any good?" And he said the weirdest sentence I've ever heard, which is, "It is very difficult to find someone to think one's thoughts after one." I'll repeat that because it's so weird. He said, "It's very difficult to find someone to think one's thoughts after one," which I guess is a prince's way of saying they kind of suck. And so I said to him, "Well, finding a good speechwriter is like finding a good marriage. It's hard to find a good one." Now, I was wearing the brown pants. It's a good thing. He saw the look of fear in my eyes, right? Because it felt like hours passed, and I realized just what I'd said to who I'd said it to. And he's still swilling his gin like this, right? Pointing at me. And in a second, I said, "Or at least that's what Ted Sorensen, who was John F. Kennedy's speechwriter, once said." He looks at me, still swilling his gin. He goes, "Well played." And walks away. Now, I look back on that as one of the highlights of my career. Not because I was brilliant in that moment or anything, but because I was a complete idiot. But my desire to do public service allowed me to be an idiot in front of the future King of England, which is pretty cool. Closer to home, running for council was a lot of fun. Over the years of writing and running campaigns for other people and helping them to decide what was important, I got to decide what was important to me and my community and run on that. So I got to put my name on a sign and on a ballot. I got to go door to door and I got to talk to people about what they care about. And I got to see a whole different side of our community. I mean, I've lived here since 1995. This is a much more diverse community than it ever was in 1995. Like when you go to door, you realize just how much our community has changed. Now, sometimes people wanted to talk to me about little things like how bright the streets, the street lights are outside their house, or sometimes they wanted to talk about things that are a little more important like traffic and bylaw. Sometimes they even want to have long conversations about restoring young people's faith in democracy and getting people voting. All of those are really important conversations. But every time I put on my shoes to go canvassing, I dreaded it because I was pretty sure someone was going to yell at me and slam the door in my face. And you know what? Nobody did. The people I met were thoughtful, they were kind, they were generous. Every time I came back from canvassing, I came back with a ton of new energy and a new belief in the people that I live with and what government can do to help them. Now, here's the thing. I'm a Ward 2 councillor. We can't solve big problems like climate change and poverty and stuff like that, but we can solve small things that matter a lot to people. The issues closest to home are the ones that we see every day, after all, and they're the ones that drive us the most nuts. And that's what's important to people. And my experience on council since being elected has only made me appreciate that a lot more. Now, Ron Hooper, who Corey mentioned, is kind of like my council mentor, and Willie Woo is his sidekick. And those guys are role models for what it means to be an active, effective, and caring councillor. And yeah, as councillors sitting around the table, we might not always agree, but like I said before, you should be able to disagree and stay friends, and because ultimately you're after the same thing, doing good for people. And in my very long experience at all levels of government, and I have worked for almost every single political party in my career, including the Greens, I can tell you that the people that I met who are in it for the right reasons vastly outnumber the people who are in it for the wrong reasons. And that's true of your Clarington Council too. Now, I don't know if anybody here in this room tonight wants to run in the next election or anything. And I gotta say, if you're thinking of running in Ward 2, don't bother, it's okay, we're good. But everybody here has three responsibilities when it comes to politics at the local level. The first is to vote. Voter turnout was 28% last time. It's abysmal. And it's the best way to influence politics for the better. It's not hard to do. The second is to consider giving some of your time or your money to good people who are running. It's really fun to be part of a campaign. If you got the energy for it, pounding in signs, going door to door is a ton of fun. But even if you don't decide to volunteer your time, there's a third thing that's really important to remember, and that is don't be cynical. I mean, I know we all love a good politician joke, but cynicism when it comes to politics is really corrosive, because if you don't expect people to do good and to perform, they're not gonna. Cynicism in the voting public lowers the bar of accountability for elected officials. It makes real change impossible because nobody believes that real change can be made. And that's particularly true about what you say around kids. I'm a former teacher. And every time we say stuff to them like, all politicians are in it for themselves, government never gets anything right, well, that's not right to do for two reasons. One, it's not true. And second, if kids from a young age hear that public service through politics is meaningless, they'll believe it. And they're gonna disengage, and they won't take it upon themselves to make things for the better, and we need those kids to be the next generation of leaders. And we don't want to say things to them that become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think one of the worst things an older person can do to a younger person is to make them cynical. The best thing you can do is lift up their eyes to what's possible if they believe, if they work hard, and they want to serve other people. If life happens to make a cynic out of them, so be it. But we should never have a hand in it. And when kids are thinking about government, tell them this from me. It's a lot of fun, because it is. And there's a saying by the Indian poet by the name of Rabindranath Tagore, who wrote, "I slept and dreamed that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy." And acting in the service of other people is joy. So that brings me to my final point, which is, what does public service accomplish? Now that is a tough one for me to answer, because I'm so new. I still have that new councillor smell. I'm still learning my way out and trying to find out how things get done. I'm happy to say I've done a couple of things. I helped add $600,000 to the snow plowing budget to next year to help clear some sidewalks. Apparently we're getting some snow tomorrow. When you're out shoveling on Saturday, think about how much better next year's gonna be. You're welcome. Beyond that, the job so far has been mostly about solving those little issues that I talked about, right? Dropping the kids off at school and lineups there, and working with staff to fix the swimming schedule, and you know, these are little changes, but they matter a lot to people. And when you add them up over 4 years, you know, hopefully it means a lot more. Ron Hooper keeps telling me to always remember that those little ways that we help people are what the job's really about. Now, can't solve everything for everybody. Not everybody that calls me is going to get the answer that they want to hear. But what you can do is you can guide them through the system, you can help them get answers, and you can be a friendly voice for somebody on the other end of the line so that they know at least somebody's listening to them and cares. And that's really, really cool, and it's really important. And tone matters a lot. Now, what I like about our new council is these are people dedicated to working together, and they have a lot of respect for each other. And we're doing our best to help Clarington make the good choices it needs to make as we grow from a small community that I moved to in 1995 to the small city that it's becoming. And like it or not, that change is coming. I've seen the renderings of the towers that are going up, folks. This is going to be a different place in a few years. And we're going to have to figure out how to keep the best parts of what we already have as we grow into the best of what we can be in the future. And having good, wise, thoughtful, effective people like my colleagues here to help make those choices, that's really vital. And I've seen in my career that public service, when it's done right, has the power to make communities like ours better. It just does. I think of people that you probably know, past giants, Al Strike, Frank Lockhart, so many other people whose accomplishments are celebrated all over plaques and buildings all over Ward 2. And I look around at some of the people that we have in town now, some of the business leaders, the volunteers, the club members, all you guys, mosque and church members, people who give their time and money and talents to make our community amazing. Now, we can choose to focus on a handful of jerks who spray paint buildings or toss trash out of their F-150 as they're going down the road, but that's missing the point. You focus on that stuff, you get cynical, you get mad, you get angry, you get ineffective. The real beauty of this community lies in everybody who signs up, everybody who shows up, and everybody who pitches in every time they're needed. And when I look at those public servants all around town, tonight in this room, that is what inspires me. That is what makes my job fun. And that is why I choose to believe that we really can do great things together, you and I, as public servants here in Clarington, together. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lloyd. That was fantastic. I'm glad you changed your speech. But seriously, though, politicians are funny.